time. So thank you so much for letting us be here with you. Kent's asked me to tell you a little bit about what it's like to live with you. You big horses, you know, I've got a man who is very much a passionate, powerful, entrepreneurial executive type. And in our first years of marriage, I knew that he was like this from the very early on. I've known him since we were both in high school. And we got married when I was 19, and he was 20 when we were still in college. And we both went through university and finished on time. And he went to the military after that. And after his time in military, we settled down, had 3 children. We're working hard in church, and he was working hard to build up the business. I remember at one point in time, he was having a difficult time in business. They lost it, actually. And he and his brother were trying to decide what to do. And for a year, while they were trying to keep the business from completely failing, he would come home from work so exhausted that he'd sit in a chair and just look at the other wall. And it was like the children and I didn't exist. The house was just a place for him to come and crash emotionally and mentally. And there didn't seem to be anything I could do to help. But he recovered from that. The business went on. And he started to become successful, and he was a leader in our church. And if you would have looked at us and our family, you would have said that we were just really had it all together. The children looked well behaved. The wife looked happy. The husband was happy and energetic and being a leader, which he was designed by God to be. And we would have looked really good to you. But at home, what was happening was that I knew that Kent at work had this habit. Had this kind of work lifestyle, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. He had people that reported to him. And all day long, he was multitasking. He was on the phone. He was writing notes. He was making plans. He was heading for goals. He was thinking about what's going to happen in the next hour while he's talking on the phone right now. His mind's just going, very busy. And he's giving directions to the secretaries and to other people that are helpers to him. And he learns how to delegate jobs very well so that everything's efficient at work. And he expects results quickly. He expects someone who he gives a job to do it. And he wants results based on his expectations, not on theirs. And he came home doing the same thing. And I felt like a convenient wife, not a cherished one. I felt like a secretary. He just came in just so hard driving, but so exhausted that he didn't even want to talk. He'd been on the phone all day. He didn't want more conversation. But he came into the house where I needed him. I needed him to include me in his life. The children needed their father. So we had this kind of quiet conflict, not outward fighting. I just felt worthless. I had no particular value in his life as far as I was concerned, except to keep the house, raise the kids, and have food ready. I was very, very defeated. But I'll tell you what, if you would have looked at me at church or in the market, you would have thought I was a totally happy, normal wife. And I suspect that some of your homes might be the same way. I needed so much to feel valued. And you know what we learned? When I finally got the courage to tell Kent how I felt, you know what his reaction was? He was so shocked that I was not happy, because he was happy. He was so shocked that he literally cried. He cried. And we finally started learning how to communicate with each other, because I was bad at that. I was frightened to communicate with him. I thought when he came in and he would have short sentences and he would tell me what to do, and I would try to do them well. I mean, I would have done anything for him. But see, he was thinking like an executive, that the work would be done like he would have done it, according to his expectations. But I was different. I didn't think like him, and I didn't work like him, and sometimes the results weren't the way he would have done it. And I was so nervous about that and so worried about not pleasing him that I hardly was able to talk to him. And I know that communication in marriage is such a hard thing anyway. Even culturally it can be. It's not what we're used to doing. But you know, if we communicated at home as much as we did at work, we would run an efficient company. We would get things done. We would have relationships that are deep and wonderful and last the trials of time. And you know, if you had two leaders at work who wouldn't talk to each other about the really difficult decisions, who wouldn't talk to each other about the main issues that came up in a business, what would that do to the business? And yet we treat home differently. I think there's a reason why when God read the scriptures from both Ephesians and Colossians, and he mentioned about wives and husbands relating to each other first, and then he brought in the children and family, then he brought in the workplace. There's a reason why that order is there. Look at what he created first in Genesis. You know, when you talk about the 5 things that you need to do to minister in the workplace, and the first question you asked was, where are you to do it? Right where you are. There's some people who are really depending on you. Really depending on you. One of the other questions, what are we to do? Love God and love people. Just what I needed. I needed to feel loved and I needed to feel valued. I needed his accessibility worse than his leaders in his workplace did. As leaders, that's, you know, he was talking about what people need from you as leaders. They need you to be have integrity, and they need you to be accessible to them. Well, what do they do when you're accessible to them? They come in with the things they need to talk about that are bothering them, that are problems in the company. And what do? You talk. But does that happen at home? Does your wife have the freedom to say, I'm having trouble with a child, or I'm worried about such and such or such and such? But your business leaders have that option with you, and we need the accessibility. But you know, I learned a lot about me too, and I give you permission to tell this to your wives. Poor Kent was trying to come from his world, where he'd been busy all day long, and come into my world, and I wasn't helping him do it. I wasn't helping a bit. There was kids' toys all over the floor that he had to run an obstacle course just to get through the room. The clutter was making him nuts. He was hungry, he was tired, he needed quiet. And he walked in and all the kids, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy! You know, and I'm needing someone to talk to because I've been with kids. And I learned from me, he needs, well, I don't know about you, but my man needs food. And if dinner's not going to be ready right away, I give a snack to him. He needs calmness, which means getting some toys picked up, and it means maybe some soft music. It means I redo my hair and my makeup so I don't look like I'm just wrecked from the day. And he needs quiet time where nobody's needing to talk yet. And if I help him re-enter my world, it's a lot easier proposition. And some of you ladies in the room could probably take that idea and go with it based on what would work in your home. And some of you guys have my permission to go back home and say that that's what you need. This lady said this crazy thing, but you know, it might really help me if you would consider doing that. Again, communication. Another one of your things was, where do we do it? Start with the people around us. Aha. And what do? We serve people. As a wife of a strong, strong business leader, I want him to be the leader of my home and my children. worse than I want him to succeed in business. I'd live in a much smaller place with much less to eat even, if he would lead me and our children. And when he treats me with the love and the value to communicate with me, I'll do anything for him. There's no problem with submission here. I'd walk over hot coals for this man. And you don't have to dig it out of me to get that kind of loyalty. You don't have an employee that would be as loyal and as honest and as available and, you want to go to India? Sure, I'll go to India. And he just said to tell you what it was like from my point of view. I'm not here as a business leader of any kind. I'm just here as a spouse. But I love my man. And we have spent years from those very first rocky ones learning how to communicate and how to be considerate of each other. Just those little things that give you value. So, that's all I know to say. You're very fortunate. This is the only group that I got her to speak up in front, and I was just sitting there. She had no notice, and I said, I just need to have you speak for a few minutes. Would you share that with them? And let me just tell you, 45 years, we're still working on it. She can now communicate. I'm still having a hard time being considerate, but I'm learning. But one of the things I've learned is in January, I tell business leaders, men, build fences around your calendar. Plan a week or a weekend or something, and you take your spouse alone without the children, just the two of you, so that she gets to talk. Now, my wife and I, we have a lake house now. You're laughing, but that's true, isn't it? And we have a lake house that's about 2.5 hours away. Now, what I do now is I'm a workaholic, but at 6 o'clock I leave work. And in fact, 3 days a week I work at home now. Because of my health, I work at home. All but 2 days a week I go to the office. And she said she'd never want me to work at home, but now she's even allowed me to work at home now. And so, but what I do is at 6 o'clock, I go home. At 6:30, I'm there. If I'm going to be late, I call her and say I'm going to be late. Now that the children are gone, I go home and we have dinner and I sit down and I listen. Now, gentlemen, if there's 2 or 3 days and I don't listen and I'm not home then for dinner, then she has more to say. If we're driving to our lake house and it's 2.5 hours and I haven't been listening for a week, then she takes the whole 2.5 hours and I listen. And so you have to either listen 10 or 15 minutes a day or it builds up. It becomes an hour. And if you don't get a weekend away, if you have to go someplace else, we went for our 45th anniversary for that special time, and she had me for about 12 days. And so I had a lot of listening. And the women just love it, see? And at the end of the vacation, we have gone many gorgeous places in the winter and in the summer, and we love to go to the Caribbean and some beautiful places. We've traveled together on ministry. We've traveled many countries around the world. And she said at the end of that time, in January, here I have limited physical strength. I couldn't do a lot of things. She said, honey, this was the most wonderful time because there was no one else with us, no grandchildren, not another couple. I just had you. That meant I could listen the whole time. And so every day we read, we did some events, but we'd have our meals together, just the two of us. And so, I caught up on a lot of listening during those days. But men, put your calendar. Let your spouse know that they're important. Schedule that weekend or that time. It doesn't take a lot of money. It takes time. They want you. And women, tell your husband. Let them know your needs. What my wife did is she had a very difficult time when she came in.
I said, she said, do you want a divorce? This was like when we'd been married 10 years. And I said, what are you talking? I had no idea my marriage was in trouble. I was a leader in business and church. I thought I was the perfect husband. And here she says, you're not meeting my needs because I didn't listen. I didn't communicate. She took a book. She underlined all the women. She underlined the passages of the book. She would put stars next to them. She said, I can't even tell you, here's the book. You read it, you will understand. And so I read the book. But listen, if you're a leader and God uses you tremendously, but you're not in communication with your spouse and in harmony with your spouse, God will not be able to use you completely. Yes. Your spouse will either cut your ministry in half or double your ministry. And so if God wants to, when God looks at you, not only does he look at the church at Mumbai as the church of Jesus Christ, he looks at your marriage as one. And so you're one. And so we men or women, there may be some strong women here who are strong in business. When we get too strong, then God has to make us weak. Through this illness I've learned, Jesus said, Paul said, God says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes we have to become weak so that we're dependent upon each other. When I'm the strongest is when I'm dependent upon Jesus and I'm dependent upon my wife, that we can do it together. She wants to do things together. Originally, she was not going to come to India. It's very difficult for her to travel on long flights because of a disease she has, rheumatoid arthritis and stuff. The worst thing she can do is sit in an airplane seat for many hours and stuff. It's very difficult for her to come this long distance to Asia. But when I had a health issue and knew that we were going to have these health issues, I said, honey, I've got to go regardless of my health. God has called me to go to India. I must go to India. And she said, that's great. You go to India, but you're not going to die in your boots in India. I'm going to be there with you. And so whatever your health issue is, I'm going to be right there with you. And I'm so glad that she's been